We are. We call Nathan Phillips.
Good afternoon, Dr. Phillips.
Good afternoon.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you today will be the whole truth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayden.
Thank you. Would you please introduce yourself?
Nathan Glenn Phillips.
And what is your profession?
I'm a scientist. I teach and do research at Boston University in the Department of Earth and Environment.
Have you prepared pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes.
Did you prepare that testimony under oath?
Yes.
Have you received any payment in connection with your review of these materials or your testimony?
No.
Did you sign your pre-filed direct testimony under the payment of penalties and charges?
Yes.
Did you offer that testimony for purposes of this hearing today?
Yes.
Did you offer Dr. Phillips his testimony?
Thank you. Dr. Phillips is available for cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Dr. Phillips.
Hi.
You signed, as you just testified, your pre-filed testimony under the pains and penalties of perjury, correct?
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
Means I'm here to tell the truth.
And that you're taking this proceeding seriously?
Yes, very much so.
And did you understand that your testimony should be accurate?
Yes.
And that it should fully state whatever opinions you might be offering as part of this proceeding, correct?
Yes.
Did you choose the words that you used in your testimony carefully?
Yes, I did.
And was it reviewed before counsel before it was filed?
Yes.
Did you identify in your testimony the materials that you reviewed in connection with preparing it?
Yes.
Is that an important part of doing scientific research and publication?
Yes. Reviewing literature is definitely important.
And is it important when you're writing about the results of your research to identify the materials that you relied upon?
Yeah, so that's why I listed them as in a reference section.
You suggest in your testimony that the applicant supplied a model and coached Mass DEP on acceptable tuning and parameterization. Is that correct?
Yes.
Paragraph for you and Mr. Cramb.
And you suggest in paragraph 3 that this gave the DEP an explicit conflict of interest. Is that right?
Yes.
And is that a serious allegation?
Yes.
What exactly gave DEP an explicit conflict of interest?
To be conducting air dispersion modeling with direct coaching by Enbridge.
And what do you mean by direct coaching?
So the journalist Itai Vardi has produced a number of stories based on public records requests from Massachusetts that show the communications occurring between Enbridge and Mass DEP, where modeling parameters are suggested to Mass DEP, and there's acknowledgement of that. So they're clearly collaborating together, working together on this model, and that's not okay. That's a conflict of interest.
I mean, I would just strike that. That's one of the grounds that is reliant upon something that's been reported by a third party, not witness.
He is witness to the proceeding.
I'll object to the motion only because the answer was elicited by the question from counsel.
That was my sense as well. You asked him the basis for his statement of that context.
Do you have any personal knowledge of what you're calling coaching?
Well, the emails that I saw that were published by Itai Vardi in Desmond blog, Huffington Post, and elsewhere.
Okay. And what did you see in those emails?
Direct communications where modeling parameters were being suggested to DEP and acknowledgement of those.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would describe as coaching that you have personal knowledge of?
I don't even know where to begin. I mean, in the health impact assessment, MAPC was talking about how Enbridge supplied what they called the best data available, which was the only data available for the modeling. So they were a direct source of the data and were coaching DEP on the model.
So their provision of data is what you're calling coaching?
No, the suggestion of which parameters to use, but as well, the provision of the data itself is part of that conflict as well.
Okay, I'm focusing in on coaching, and I've heard you say that Enbridge suggested parameters for modeling and supplied data. Do you have any other evidence of what you're calling coaching?
The emails that I referred you to that are published by Thai Party.
And can you explain what it is that they revealed to you?
That there was direct collaboration on the air dispersion model.
Meaning communication between the applicant and DEP about the model.
Collaboration on the model.
What do you mean by collaboration?
Working together to produce the model and to run the model.
What is the conflict of interest that you're describing in paragraph 3?
A entity with a financial interest in this case, the compressor station, should not be working with the regulator on a model to evaluate the basis for the permit for that model. That's a very clear and direct financial conflict of interest.
So you're not suggesting that the DEP is a financial conflict of interest in this case, correct?
Well, I think Governor Baker does have a conflict of interest, and so DEP does because they work for Baker. He gets money from Enbridge, from Eversource, National Grid. Those are all co-investors in the Weymouth compressor station. So yeah, I do believe there's conflicts of interest throughout this entire process.
Have you described all of the financial conflict of interest that the DEP has in this proceeding?
In my testimony, or would you like me to go on about it here?
No, I'm asking you sitting here today, can you please describe any other financial conflicts of interest that the DEP has with respect to this proceeding?
Well, I say it's the Baker administration, and there's a wealth of information about the financial contributions to this administration from the applicant and the co-investors in the Weymouth compressor station proposal.
And in your view, is that in fact the DEP's decision-making in this case?
Yes.
And what is the evidence you have to support that?
Again, I don't even know where to begin, but the evidence of Mass DEP, for example, not making public carcinogenic data from the Rhode Island Health Laboratory, even though they had it in hand before the health impact assessment was recorded, before the air permit was granted. These do not, to me, seem to be consistent with a neutral body that's evaluating and serving as a regulator.
Anything else?
Well, like where we started with the financial conflict of interest, where Enbridge is coaching Mass DEP on the model, giving them parameters, suggesting it. The emails are very clear on this.
You say that the financial conflict of interest violates a basic premise of research integrity in paragraph 3 of your testimony. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that means that this conflict that you perceive is not consistent to you with the practice of scientific research and publication, correct?
Yes, if I were to publish a paper that did not acknowledge a funding source, that would be scientific misconduct. The paper would be retracted, and that would be a serious breach of academic conduct.
Is your testimony that you submitted in connection with this proceeding consistent with standards applicable to scientific research and publication?
I believe so.
Is the submission, in addition to coaching, in paragraph 3, you also suggest that the applicant's supply of a model to DEP is also somehow a conflict of interest. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, a supply of a model, I mean, I call it the Enbridge model. I refer to it as the Enbridge model in my testimony. It basically is, they, as I said, provided parameters to DEP for that modeling purpose. So there was a collaboration working together on that model.
And is the submission of an air dispersion model by an applicant or a comprehensive plan application inconsistent with your experience with the process that DEP has undertaken with respect to other applications?
Well, I'm here to talk about this application, so I don't really have knowledge of DEP's actions in other applications.
You don't know what the regular practice is with respect to modeling for non-major comprehensive plan applications, right?
Well, I'm speaking as a scientist in terms of scientific integrity, and quantitative, modeling is a scientific practice, so that's where I'm speaking from.
Okay, so you don't know about DEP's regular practice with respect to air dispersion modeling that's applied in connection with non-major comprehensive plan applications, correct?
Well, I actually did read one of the rebuttal arguments by Mr. Fickus, who pointed out something about the EPA's advice or guidance on that, so I actually do know a little bit about that.
You know about the DEP's regular practice with respect to air dispersion modeling for non-major comprehensive plan applications.
Insofar as they follow that guidance that was pointed out by Mr. Fickus, yes.
And do you know whether, in connection with other non-major comprehensive plan applications, DEP confers with the applicant about the model that's being submitted and the parameters that are being suggested and proposed for the model?
Yeah, conferring is a different term than collaborating. And coordination is not the same as collaboration. So I can give an example. So a hostage negotiator and a kidnapper can coordinate on the terms of a release. That doesn't mean they're collaborating on the kidnapping.
How is it that the DEP collaborated with the
Well,
applicant in this case?
Mr. Fickus, in his rebuttal, used the term collaborate twice. So I think that was,
What do you understand that means?
working together on something. Collaborate means to work together for some common purpose, some common job. And that's different than coordination. That's different than communication. That's different than conferring.
And the collaboration that you've described so far sitting here today, in your view, is improper, is that correct?
Yes, it's a financial conflict of interest.
So, besides what we've discussed today so far, are there any other reasons why you don't feel that Mass DEP exercised independent judgment with respect to the application?
And I don't even know where to start. That's a very wide-ranging question. Boy, there's a litany. But, again, I can go back to, for example, the Rhode Island Department of Health elevated carcinogen data that was solicited by DEP, paid for by taxpayer dollars, received before the HIA was published and before the air quality permit was issued. And that data was withheld from the public. So I don't know how else to explain that withholding of data, important data from the public, elevated carcinogen data from the public, unless it's related to a conflict of interest.
Right, and you said that, but what I'm asking is there anything else that led you to believe that, except for what you've already said today, that led you to believe that the DEP did not exercise independent judgment?
I'm just, yes, but specifically, I'd have to review all my notes.
The air quality plan approval that's at issue in this proceeding is not a scientific publication, correct?
Could you repeat the question?
Is the air quality plan approval a scientific publication?
No, it's an approval, it's a permit.
I've looked at your extensive resume supplied along with your testimony, which is behind the first tab, and I did not see air dispersion models as something that you've ever published on. Is that correct?
Do you see the one on Lagrangian dispersion? It was one of my earliest publications with, it's a Lagrangian dispersion model that was done to evaluate CO2 exchange, energy and water vapor at Duke Forest, where I did my PhD. You should see that.
Can you direct me to it?
I don't have my CV on me right now, but if you want to.
It was attached to your testimony?
Should be 1995. Yes, 1997, Catul, Orrin, Ellsworth, Shea, Phillips, a Lagrangian dispersion model for predicting CO2 sources, sinks, and fluxes in the uniform low-volley pine stand.
Where are you?
This is, well, the publications run from earliest to latest, so that would be on, it's not paginated in this particular copy, so I can.
I think I've got it.
Got it? Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 above editor special journal issues.
That's right.
What is a Lagrangian dispersion model?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways in which you can model the movement of air parcels in a turbulent field, and one is called Lagrangian, the other is Eulerian. And one is which, the best way to explain it is that if you look at a waterfall, one is watching as water things go by a certain point.
Water things?
Parcels of water flow past a point. The other would be is if you look at a waterfall and trace a piece of that water as it's falling down. So there are different coordinate systems for understanding the dispersion of materials. So the Lagrangian traces parcels of air through the turbulence.
And what were you studying with respect to this?
CO2 sources and sinks in a pine forest in North Carolina,
What does
Duke
it mean,
University.
CO2 source and sink?
So forests, plants take up CO2, so that's a sink for CO2. Compressor stations are a source of CO2. They send CO2 to the air.
And is that the only publication that you've done that relates to air dispersion?
No. Many of my publications, they may not have that in the title, but they definitely utilize the micrometeorology and dispersion measurements, models, and characterizations. So let's see. So 1996, latent and sensible heat flux predictions from uniform forests using surface renewal and flux variance methods. That is one.
Sorry,
Yeah, there's more.
1996 is the radial trends in xylem sap flow?
Yes. Oh, no, not the one I mentioned. I mentioned the one latent and sensible heat flux predictions, 1996. But all of these do, even the one you mentioned, Phillips, 1997, are based on physical principles of transport of materials through either porous media or air.
And is air mod then something that you have experience with before this case?
Not before this case.
Not something you've ever worked on,
No, I have not published on AirMod.
and it's not something you ever used before this case?
Correct. Parts of it, yeah. I didn't do modeling, as you know, for my testimony, so, yeah.
Trying to figure out the scope of your expertise. Could I direct you to paragraph 18 of your testimony, and also figure 9 on the prior page.
Okay.
You say in paragraph 18, bear with me, that visual evidence of the Calpine Four River Energy Center exhaust shown in figure 9 of your report, there's a photograph, I guess, on the previous page, along with consideration of comparable physical properties of exhaust from the proposed Enbridge compressor, is sufficient to demonstrate that the compressor station plant would, during similar inversion conditions to that shown on figure 9, expose residents to nearly undiluted compressor exhaust. Correct?
Yes.
Is this an example of your testimony being consistent with principles of scientific research and publication?
I believe so.
Can you tell from a single photograph that the Calpine plant, as shown in figure 9, is experiencing inversion conditions?
Well, the intent was to demonstrate that it can happen, and there's visual evidence that it does. So the standard of demonstration there is different than doing a full annual assessment, for example. Just the point was just to show that with your eyes you can see this plume of pollution descending down into the neighborhood, and so I think that is pertinent. Yeah.
It's not real scientific research, is it?
Well, here's an example. If you could find one person in the world that could be documented to be 300 years old, that's a data point of 1. That is still a very significant scientific finding. So in some cases, anecdotes, if they're framed in the right way, have a great deal of scientific validity.
And can you tell from the single photograph that the Calpine plant was experiencing inversion conditions at that point in time?
No, because there was no weather data accessible to me for that. So, yeah.
And you need that to do scientific research.
To show that a plume is descending to, into the neighborhood is the visual evidence is compelling, and the point was really that the modeling that was conducted is not able to evaluate the conditions in which this could occur.
Did you rule out, beyond inversion, other possibilities that would cause the plume to take the shape that you see in figure 9?
Well, that to me looks like a looping plume, and that is described in the book that I had in graduate school by Tim Oak, who's a recognized expert in the field of boundary layer meteorology as a looping plume.
It's a looping plume.
Yeah.
Can you tell from the photograph whether this condition lasted for more than a second?
Yes.
Can you tell how long it lasted from this photograph?
No.
Can you rule out that this was caused from or by impact from a wind gust?
Well, inversions and sea breezes and all of these phenomenon are wind related. So yes, in fact, they are related to winds.
Can you tell from this photograph that residents were exposed to nearly undiluted compressor exhaust?
It does look to me that the plume is descending to ground level, so I would say yes. I didn't say totally undiluted, nearly undiluted. It looks like that plume is descending down to ground level.
Did you take any measurements to test that theory?
No, I did not. But I do have some other related evidence, which was that when Enbridge's valve failed, I think it was February 6, 2017, the smell of that gas release, I think was smelled up to a mile away. It was about 214,000 cubic feet of gas that was estimated to have been released during that gas leak. And so there's different kinds of evidence. There's smell, there's visual evidence, but in that particular case, yeah, it was experienced by a lot of the public.
Not with respect to this picture, you're talking about something else, right?
I'm talking about releases of gas from the vicinity of that area, because the current metering and regulating station, as you know, is very, very close to Calpine.
Right, so you're not talking about what's happening in Hingham. I'm just trying to decipher.
The valve failure
Yeah.
gas release? No, that wasn't from Calpine. That was not coming out of the Calpine stack.
In paragraph 18, one of the reasons that you say you expect that the compressor station that's being proposed would experience a similar phenomenon to what we see in figure 9 is that its exhaust temperature is lower than the Calpine exhaust temperature coming out of that stack in your picture, correct?
It's one of the factors. Yeah.
And that's something that you carefully investigated, correct?
Well, temperature, the buoyancy of air is related to the temperature by the ideal gas law, so it's very important to know what the temperature of any exhaust is, because that'll basically say how buoyant that is relative to the ambient air.
Okay, and because it's very important to know the temperature, you carefully researched what the temperature was, the comparative temperature coming out of the stack at Calpine and the stack that's been proposed for the Weymouth compressor station, correct?
To the best of my ability, with the time that I had to prepare this testimony, I did whatever I could to find, and I think I did find the different exhaust temperatures of those. Yeah.
Are you saying that it wasn't careful because of time limitations?
No.
And to determine the temperature of the exhaust leaving the Calpine facility, you looked at the spec for the turbine that you believe is in that facility, correct?
Yeah, I think so. I got attachment G, Algonquin 2016 shows the exhaust temperature from the Enbridge compressor between 865 and 999 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas the Calpine exhaust temperature I list as 1,113 degrees Fahrenheit with and in both cases, and I have the references there.
Yeah, okay. And
So that's what I understood to be the appropriate
and
descriptors.
one of the references is for Calpine, correct?
Yeah.
And the Calpine reference is something that you found on the web, which was the specifications for the turbine, correct?
Yeah, that'd be table B1, Algonquin 2016.
No,
Right.
I'm focused on Calpine, not the proposed compressor station. May I approach?
You may.
I can show you what I found at that link. Just take a look at that. Let me know if you recognize it.
Yeah, this looks familiar.
And if you turn to the second page,
Yeah.
you see that the.
Just wait until that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
just to take a step back, in paragraph 18, you say that the exhaust coming out of the proposed compressor station will be between 865 degrees and 990 degrees Fahrenheit, correct?
Yes, I say that.
You say that that's lower and less buoyant than the Calpine exhaust, which is over 1,000 degrees, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then this specification is the document that you use to source the Calpine exhaust temperature from, right?
Yes.
This is the product specification sheet for Calpine's M501G turbine, correct?
Yes, as I understand.
And is this a specification sheet for any equipment beyond the turbine?
Well, it says gas turbines on the cover of this M501G series, so I take that to mean that these are specifications for a gas turbine.
Okay, me too. So the exhaust temperature on this spec sheet is the temperature of the exhaust when it leaves the turbine, correct?
Well, it says exhaust.
Right? And is that the exhaust when it leaves the turbine? Or something else? If you know.
Well, it's the exhaust turbine.
Right. Does the spec sheet have anything to do with the stack that would be used to vent the exhaust from a turbine?
I don't know.
You know. Does the spec sheet have anything to do with the 220-foot stack that Calpine uses to exhaust, to vent its exhaust from the turbine?
I don't know that.
Is that something you endeavored to figure out when you were doing your scientific research on this point?
I would say that with a 60-foot stack compared to a 200-foot stack, any change or decrease in temperature would be moderate, even lower in the shorter stack. So it'd be hotter if anything.
Did you research whether Calpine's post-combustion controls and specific stack impacts the temperature of the exhaust from its turbine?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, did you research whether Calpine's post-combustion controls and specific stack impacts the temperature of the exhaust from its turbine?
No, because that was not in this spec sheet. If it were in the spec sheet, I would have taken that into account.
I'd like to move to admit that spec sheet into the record, please. It's cited in this testimony.
That document was out this month.
Yes. And he confirmed it.
That can come in.
So, are you aware that you know what the Four River Energy Center is, right?
Yes.
That's the location of the Calpine stack that shown in your figure 9?
Yes.
And are you aware that the Four River Energy Center recently applied for an air permit from Black Start emergency generators?
It sounds familiar.
Make a push.
Make.
This.
Wait till the copies go
Yes.
around, please.
Did I cite this in my testimony? I think I did. Okay.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
Do you recognize what we've just marked as the next exhibit?
I think we're
You're asking if I recognize this
Have
document?
you ever seen it before?
I don't remember seeing this particular document.
Have you seen documents that concern the Four River Energy Center's application for Black Start emergency energy generators?
Is that what this is?
Well, let's take a look at it. You see the title of the document, that it is a non-major comprehensive plan approval application report?
Yes?
And you see that it is, describes the Four River Black Start emergency generators, Weymouth, Massachusetts,
Yes.
in September 2017.
Mm-hmm.
You see it was prepared for the Four River Energy Center. Okay,
Yes.
so is this a document you've ever seen before?
I don't remember.
It's not something that you looked at in connection with your analysis of Figure 9 in the report, correct?
Yeah, the purpose of that was to basically demonstrate that plumes that come out of that stack can descend to ground level, and that was the point I wanted to make. So I used the arguments that I felt supported that, and yeah.
All right. So you were aware that the Four River Energy Center had applied for a air permit with respect to the Black Start emergency energy generators, correct?
I don't know.
Could you turn to page 5.2 of this document?
Okay.
And you see there's a table 5.2 on page 5.2?
Yep.
And you see there's rows that correspond to the Black Start engines that are being proposed, at various loads, and there are rows for the existing turbine units 1 and 2. See that?
Yeah.
And there's a stack exhaust temperature that's provided. And for the existing units, in each instance, it's 366 degrees Kelvin. See that?
Yeah.
Do you know how to convert Kelvin to Fahrenheit?
Yes, 273.15 plus the Celsius, and then the Celsius is 9/5 plus 32 on
I could not do that. Looked it up. Take a look. Just take a look at that for me. And using an online calculator, I determined that 366 degrees Kelvin is roughly 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Do you agree roughly with that math? You can take time to look at that.
how many Kelvin are you talking? What?
366 is the number reported from table 5.2. 366.5.
Okay.
Roughly converts to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, correct?
Yep.
So, at least in this document, the Four River Energy Center described the temperature of the exhaust leaving from its stack, as opposed to its turbine, as being roughly 200 degrees, not 1,000 degrees, correct?
According to the document that you just given me, yeah.
And beyond looking at a specification sheet with a turbine alone, notwithstanding, never minding the stack and whatever combustion controls might exist with the Calpine unit, you didn't do any research to determine whether the temperature leaving the Calpine stack was 200 degrees or 1,000 degrees, correct?
So I wanted to really focus on the comparison between the two facilities to show that they were comparable in the properties of the exhaust, and what I showed, I think, showed that they're comparable in terms of the exhaust. There will be, with a shorter stack, less reduction in temperature than with the taller stack. So I think that if they're comparable temperatures, or even hotter for the proposed compressor station coming out of the turbine, and you have a shorter stack, for emissions. My point was to make that they're comparable, and that's so in terms of the buoyancy effect, one effect among many, they're unlikely to be different, substantially different.
You said a minute ago that it was very important to know the temperature of the exhaust coming out of the stack, correct?
A lot of things are very important. Yes, temperature is important.
But now it doesn't matter. Your analogy holds true, even if you were way off on the temperature with respect to
The temperature of the exhaust.
We're at the top.
The objection was to the form of the question.
Can you please read back the question?
Sure. But now it doesn't matter, your analogy holds true even if you were way off on the temperature with respect to the exhaust.
I'll sustain that objection. Can you rephrase that?
Is your testimony now that your analogy holds true, even if you were off by roughly 600 degrees with respect to the temperature of the exhaust using the Alpine stack?
I believe that my comparisons of the exhausts from those facilities are comparable. And so that makes them, comparable in terms of the exhaust.
In paragraph 5 of your testimony, you expressed 2 technical concerns with respect to the Enbridge model, which you say invalidate the model.
Okay.
Do you mean that technical concerns invalidate AirMod, or they invalidate the applicant's modeling results using AirMod? Or both?
They invalidate the modeling that was done for this project.
Okay, not AirMod itself. The model.
No, I'm not. So AirMod, in my understanding, has some large limitations, but my point was that the modeling was not done in a way to capture these very important effects.
You say that in paragraph 5.1, Enbridge mischaracterized the site as rural when it is in fact a coastal shoreline site embedded in it, try that again. You say that Enbridge mischaracterized the site as rural when in fact it is a coastal shoreline site embedded in an urban coastal community, correct?
Yes.
One of the things that AirMod requires the modeler to do is select a rural or urban option. Is that right?
Yes.
Are you suggesting that Enbridge should have, the applicant should have used the urban option in connection with this model?
Well, it's an urban region that it's in, and so they should have all of this considering urban. The best thing to have done if they felt that the site deserved a rural designation is to run both models.
Do you believe that the applicant should have used the urban designation with respect to its model?
Well, the health impact assessment actually refers to the site as urban, so it's very confusing to me that it's being called urban in one context, but then it's being called rural in another context. So I think that there needs to be consistency, and clearly the population density in the region is to me is urban. That has a number of impacts.
Do you know how the urban designation is defined within AirMod?
I have some information on that. So yeah.
How?
Is it okay if I pull it up on my phone?
Oh, no.
I screenshotted it, so it's right here.
Not something you know off the top of your head. Is that correct?
I know there's various definitions for urban, so I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly one, but population density certainly is a descriptor of urban.
And did you go through an analysis that was suggested by AirMod to determine whether or not the site is whether the modeling should have been done with an urban or rural designation?
Well, no, because I did not do the modeling myself. I'm not someone, and I didn't purport in my testimony to have actually run the model. I'm critiquing the model, but I didn't run the model.
In paragraph 11 of your testimony, you say that the Enbridge model is unable to capture onshore and offshore winds because it did not use a coastal parameterization in AirMod.
Is that paragraph 11? Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
What exactly do you mean by that?
Yes, I've thought about this, and from a number of the figures that I've shown in my testimony, you can see the extreme temperature difference between the water and the land. Even Boston Harbor and the Boston Logan temperature sensor in January differ by over 10 degrees. That's a large temperature difference. The data that was used to drive AirMod, in my understanding, did not incorporate that kind of information. And if I was thinking of an example to use, it's like the fundamental driving force for sea breezes and for all winds are the differential heating at the surface of the planet, whether that's water or land. That's where the circulations are set up. And again, as you can see from the figures that I showed, there's extreme gradients and discontinuities right at the shoreline. To simply use one temperature sensor at Logan Airport, coupled with an upper air measurement in Gray, Maine, which is, if I recall, I think it's a kilometer up, or it's many hundreds of meters up, is unable to capture the effect of those very strong discontinuities and gradients in the energy balance, the temperature, and therefore the resulting land to sea breezes or sea to land breezes. And so in terms of a modeling that's based on first principles, to me, that'd be like trying to predict how fast a pot of water would heat up from measuring on the top of the lid instead of knowing what was coming in at the base.
Okay. So when you say that the applicant should have used coastal parameterization, are you suggesting some specific option in AirMod, or just generally that you don't think the modeling did all it could to account for its coastal location?
Right, so elsewhere I say in my testimony that EPA has given guidance on exactly the point you're raising. And in fact, I quote them. So this is quoted, the US EPA, this is paragraph 19, the US EPA Bailey 2000, in guidance for use of models of the type used by Enbridge and its consultant Trinity, states the necessity of proper treatment of coastal sites for air pollution dispersion modeling.
I'm sorry, I lost where you were.
Okay, so paragraphs 19 and 20. Should I start over? Paragraph 19, halfway down. Or, yeah, the US EPA, in guidance for use of models of the type used by Enbridge and its consultant Trinity, states the necessity of proper treatment of coastal sites for air pollution dispersion modeling. Quote, this is paragraph 20, the unique meteorological conditions associated with local scale land, sea, breeze circulations necessitate, that's emphasis that I added, special considerations. For example, a stably stratified air mass over water can become unstable over land due to changes in roughness and heating encountered during daytime conditions and onshore flow. An unstable thermal internal boundary layer can develop, which can cause rapid downward fumigation of a plume initially released into the stable onshore flow. And it goes on, but I'll just maybe stop at that point.
No, that's helpful. And so, did you take the additional steps that you're suggesting the applicant should have taken in this case?
No, as I said, I've not been the person to implement this model. That was the job of Mass DEP.
In that paragraph you're just looking at, you say that, or I guess it's in 19, that the Enbridge model considers Weymouth as if it were no different from a grassland in Kansas, right?
In terms of its treatment of lateral heterogeneity, yes.
Only
Or lack of heterogeneity is what I would say. Yeah.
And you are aware, for example, that Enbridge's modeling incorporated meteorological data from Logan Airport, which is referenced, correct?
Yeah.
And Logan Airport is in fact on the coast, is it not?
Yes.
Logan Airport is not in the middle of the country like Kansas, is it?
No.
And you're aware that Enbridge's modeling incorporated meteorological data from Gray May, which you also just referenced, correct?
Yeah.
And that's not in the middle of the country, is it?
Yeah, I said it was like modeling a grassland in Kansas in terms of its treatment of its lack of treatment of lateral heterogeneity. So in that sense, the analogy I stand by.
Okay, but that's not what your testimony says, correct? Your testimony says, yet the Enbridge model considers Weymouth as if it were no different from a grassland in Kansas, period. Correct?
Yeah, those are my words.
Okay, that was a little bit of exaggeration.
Not in terms of its treatment of lateral uniformity, which is the key point I was making. It ignores the fact that there's a shoreline. That's like a very glaring error.
Even though meteorological data from the shoreline, from a shoreline was used. The data from Logan Airport, actually one of my figures shows that it is highly impacted by the urban heat island effect. If you have a color version of that photo, you can see it glowing red. And that's, if you look at the other picture, the other graph I showed that shows the difference in temperature between the water surface in Boston Harbor and that same thing, and that same meteorological station at Logan Airport, they differ drastically. So when you're calling it a shoreline measurement of temperature, I don't know whether you're talking about a land or a water temperature. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Fallon?
Hi, thank you. Sir, my name is MacDara Fallon. I represent the department. I have a few questions for you regarding the keep out that testimony, and in particular some of the testimony you gave earlier this afternoon. Mr. Phillips, is Mr. Phillips or Dr. Phillips?
I'm not big on titles, but
Okay.
you can refer to me however you want.
Mr. Phillips, have you ever personally made an application with the department for a permit under any of our programs?
No.
Have you ever personally represented another party in filing an application with the department for a permit under any of our programs?
No.
Have you any familiarity with the department's standard procedures in dealing with applications from the public under any of our programs?
Through this process, I have become familiar.
And what's that familiarity? The rebuttal testimony by
Mr. Fickus pointed out that DEP takes guidance from the EPA and that there is recommendation for joint, whatever the words are, joint decision as to sites to be used for modeling. So that is,
Your understanding.
yeah,
And sorry, the word consultation, could you use, are you familiar with that word in terms of your testimony from earlier today?
well, I say that there was collaboration working together on this model, and Mr. Ficus also used those terms, collaboration. That term does not show up in the EPA guidance for how applicants ought to be engaged in the permitting process with a regulatory agency.
So when you talk about the guidance, are you talking about Appendix W?
I think so. I don't have it right in front of me.
Do you know what Appendix W is? When I say Appendix W, what does that mean to you?
A guidance for the modeling.
Guidance model,
Yeah.
under the air regulation.
Yeah.
Sir, I can show, let me show you a copy of Appendix W. This document is in the administrative record already. Mr. Ficus's exhibit number 5. I want to show it to the witness, if I may, just to address some of his prior testimony on consultation and collaboration with the department.
No, if I could just see it first, if he doesn't have it.
Yeah, I don't. These are my witnesses.
Mr. Fallon, do you remember which exhibit or I guess that was?
Exhibit number 5, Mr. Davis,
Rebuttal.
thank you. So if you don't mind, just want to show you what I'm referring to. And, to be clear on the record, I just marked the sections on the document. I just want to make you aware of how the department said, Appendix W. You see, sir, in the left column, 7.2.1.1 dispersion coefficients.
Yeah.
Do you know what a dispersion coefficient is?
Yeah, that would be a value, a parameter for the model that dictates how readily a gas or a constituent will spread into the environment.
And do you see to the left, I marked it, the first column, last sentence in the paragraph. Do you mind reading that, sir?
Selection of the appropriate population for these applications should be determined in consultation with the appropriate reviewing authority.
And you know in this case who the appropriate reviewing authority would be?
Should be the DEP.
Would that be your understanding in any other reference to consultation with the appropriate reviewing authority as contained in Appendix 7? The
Say that
DEP would be the appropriate reviewing authority.
in relation to.
Consultations being made on application. In error.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Could I just add, consultation also to me does not mean collaboration.
Understood.
Yes.
Sir, in your testimony, you earlier today, you referenced some financial conflicts of interest. So are you saying that DEP employees accepted some kind of financial benefit from their work on this project?
I'm saying that there was collaborative work on the basis for an air permit to be issued that involved a party that had a financial interest in the permit being issued.
So that really was my question, but what party has a financial interest in having this permit issued?
Enbridge.
Enbridge, right. So my question is, are you saying department employees would get a financial benefit by approving this permit?
I put this on Governor Baker.
Right, that's not my question, sir. Are you saying that department employees would get a financial benefit by approving this permit?
No, I don't think that department employees themselves were given money as a result, in exchange for issuing this permit.
Are you saying there
Never
was
said that.
I'm sorry, are you saying there was any financial incentive for department employees to approve this permit?
No, not the department employees themselves.
Thank you. Sir, are you aware that in air applications, applicants, when they make their application to departments, the applicant always does the modeling? Are you aware of that?
Always does the modeling.
Yes.
No, I'm not aware of that because then the communication between Enbridge and DEP wouldn't have been, I think, necessary if Enbridge was doing the entirety of the modeling.
How would the department get the information on the modeling if it were communicated to the department by Enbridge?
Yeah, so communicating information, I think, is there has to be coordination and communication, but that's different, as I said, from collaborating on the model.
Which is also different from consultation.
Yeah, consultation. Again, I use the analogy of a kidnapper and a hostage negotiator. Certainly the terms of a release require consultation and communication. That doesn't mean that they're working together in collaboration.
So, and then I need to clarify this a little more so because it's just, rather different testimony. So are you saying department staff collaborate with Enbridge in some inappropriate way?
Well, I think that the public records requests that were made by investigative journalist Itai Vardy show these communications and collaboration on the modeling exercise, yes.
In what way were those communications inappropriate in your mind?
They demonstrated collaborative work on this model, not just as in the other rebuttal testimony, the joint selection of sites to be modeled. That's, again, something that requires communication and coordination, but that's different than collaboration.
And where does the financial benefit to come in on the part of the Mass DEP that you testified about earlier?
Well, I wonder about job security and those kinds of things under the Baker administration, which has received large amounts of money from Enbridge and its associates, Eversource, National Grid, and others who have interests. So National Grid, of course, being a co-investor in the Weymouth compressor station, Eversource being a co-investor in the Weymouth compressor station. I think the story just came out recently that Eversource contributed, I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars to Governor Baker's inaugural party. So there's a lot of financial connections between investors in the Weymouth compressor station proposal and the Baker administration. But I don't put that onto the Mass DEP employees themselves.
So, if I understand your testimony correctly, there's no financial link between whether a Mass DEP employee approves this or denies this. Is that your testimony?
I don't believe that there is a direct payment of money to Mass DEP employees. I do wonder whether they would have concerns about their job security or their job security, their ability to thrive in the environment in which probably many of those employees went in for the right reasons.
You would agree with me, sir, this is pure speculation on your part, correct?
Well, you asked me, so I'm giving you my opinion.
And that is pure speculation on your part, correct?
It's my opinion.
It's a speculation.
I don't know. I mean, if you want to define opinion versus speculation, the opinion.
What's the difference to use sir, how do you define the difference between an opinion and a speculation?
Well, an opinion should be based on some, I think, a educated opinion, some evidence, and so, or some rationale. And so the Baker administration's receiving of funding from investors in the Weymouth compressor station, to me, raised the question, and it's my opinion, that there are financial conflicts of interest. And the executive branch, the buck stops at the governor, and so Mass DEP operates under the authority of the governor, and so that's my opinion, is that there are financial conflicts of interest throughout this whole process.
Do you have any evidence that Mass DEP employees somehow financially gained, or what financially gained to the approval of this permit?
No, and I want to make it very clear that I'm not suggesting that Mass DEP employees themselves stood to gain financially from this. I do wonder if job security issues and those kinds of things were at play here.
But again, your wondering is speculation, correct?
On the job security issue for DEP employees? Yeah, I'd say, yeah.
Sir, what were you wondering about? Was that based on evidence or speculation?
Well, for the Mass DEP employees, I just wonder if that's the case, but I don't have any proof or evidence for it.
So
But since
you
you,
agree with me that that's speculation?
well, I never in my testimony referred to Mass DEP employees as having a direct financial conflict of interest. So that's a question that you brought up that was not in my testimony. So I think you invited me to speculate on that.
If I turn your attention, sir, to your pre-trial direct testimony, figure 9, it's a picture of a plume that you submitted to this topic.
Yes.
I believe on cross-examination you called it a looping plume.
That's what it looks like to me from the picture.
Can you explain to me what is a looping plume? What is a looping plume?
It's a condition in which there's a inversion layer, a cap of air that differentiates one air body below from an air body aloft above that. And so the stability conditions of the atmosphere inside that inversion layer lead to this kind of looping phenomenon.
So your testimony is that a looping plume can occur during an inversion event?
Yes, it can be.
And I'm sorry, do you have any meteorological training or background or citations to support that testimony?
Yeah, so I spent quite a bit of time reviewing the textbook that I used as a graduate student by Tim Oke, O-K-E. It's referenced in my comments, and in that there is quite a bit of information on the conditions that lead to the different kinds of plumes.
And I'm sorry, so you may have been asked this question, but have you ever received any training in the Air Mod program?
I have not used AirMod.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Mr. Hayden?
No redirect, Ms. Rothschild. I just did want to note for the record that to the extent the witness's testimony on conflicts of interest went beyond the pre-filed direct testimony, it was not my client's position to offer that with the pre-filed direct testimony. The witness was under oath and had no choice but